When I first moved into Pine Ridge Estates, I wasn't looking for drama. I wanted quiet, peace, a little space where I could enjoy my modest 3-bedroom house, decompress after teaching hormonal teenagers all day, and maybe grow some tomatoes in the backyard. That's it. No big dreams, just some semblance of calm after a recent cross-state move and the emotional whiplash of restarting my life alone. The neighborhood, on the surface, was everything I could have hoped for: wide streets, trimmed hedges, kids biking on the sidewalk, and retirees nodding from their porches like suburban sentinels. My house had a 2-car driveway, a tiny patch of grass out front, and a garage that currently doubled as a storage unit filled with unopened boxes labeled things like books, fragile, and stuff I'll probably never use again. As a new high school English teacher in town, I was just happy to land in a place that felt safe. A quiet corner of the world to write lesson plans and rewatch bad Netflix thrillers while eating cereal for dinner. That illusion lasted exactly 6 days. Because on the 7th day, Linda Harrington introduced herself. I was at the neighborhood welcome mixer, a pastel-infested backyard affair hosted by a family down the street who served lemonade in mason jars and passed out name tags with glitter borders. I had just filled a paper plate with Costco shrimp cocktail and half a cookie when she found me. "Ah, you must be the new teacher at Westfield High," a syrupy voice trilled behind me. I turned around, and there she was, Linda Harrington, HOA president, school board treasurer, possibly the self-anointed empress of Pine Ridge Estates. She had the look. Crisp white tennis skirt, not a hair out of place in her platinum blonde bob, and a clipboard clutched against her chest like a sacred text. She smiled at me like I was a new puppy she might have to return if I chewed on the carpet. "I'm Linda Harrington. You'll want to familiarize yourself with our community guidelines. They're quite extensive." She handed me a 3-inch binder. Not a pamphlet. Not a PDF link. A binder, with color-coded tabs, laminated section dividers, and a table of contents longer than most wedding vows. "Wow," I said, tucking it under my arm. "I'll make it my weekend reading." Her smile didn't waver, but her eyes scanned me like a TSA agent spotting a suspicious bulge in my carry-on. "We take pride in keeping Pine Ridge orderly. I'm sure you'll fit in just fine, once you get settled." She moved on, greeting a retiree couple with the same tight smile and air of civic dominance. I stood there, holding shrimp and HOA law in the same hand, thinking, what the hell did I just sign up for? The binder. Oh, the binder. I tossed it on the kitchen counter when I got home from the mixer, telling myself I'd crack it open later. Maybe while watching a documentary or folding laundry. Days passed. I taught classes, graded essays, and successfully assembled a bookshelf without cursing too much. The binder stared at me like an unpaid bill. Eventually, guilt won. I sat down with a highlighter and a glass of wine, ready to understand the mind of Linda Harrington. What I found was a labyrinth of overregulation, micromanagement, and vaguely threatening language about shrub height and acceptable holiday decor timelines. It was written like a legal contract and enforced like a religious doctrine. Some highlights. Driveways must be clear of all oversized recreational vehicles, unless shielded from public view. Trash bins must be retrieved within 43 minutes of pickup. Yes, 43. Only pre-approved front door colors were permitted. A palette of 8 options, all neutrals, none joyful. By the time I hit page 27, I realized this wasn't a neighborhood. It was a curated lifestyle cult. And Linda, she was the high priestess. Still, I kept my lawn mowed, my recycling neat, and my Jeep Wrangler neatly parked in my driveway. I followed the rules, or at least tried to stay close enough that I couldn't be accused of rebellion. Because if the binder had taught me one thing, it was this: deviance would not be tolerated. The first real clash with Linda came not in the neighborhood, but at school. We both served on the planning committee for the annual school fundraiser, a committee that, until my arrival, had been Linda's domain. She had chaired it for years, overseeing a tried-and-true silent auction that mostly sold off donated gift baskets and homemade pies. At the first meeting, seated in the library with 4 other teachers and a PTO mom who brought mini-muffins, Linda launched into her plan. "We'll follow the traditional format," she announced, adjusting her cardigan. "Silent auction, light refreshments, and a jazz quartet from the senior center. It's always been a lovely evening." I cleared my throat gently. I actually organized a carnival fundraiser at my last school. We raised double the usual funds with games, food trucks, and student performances. I'd be happy to share the blueprint if anyone's interested. You could hear a pin drop on the carpeted floor. Linda's smile didn't falter, but her tone sharpened like a freshly honed knife. That sounds ambitious. But we have established traditions here. Perhaps you should focus on learning our ways before suggesting changes. A few of the other staff shifted in their seats. The muffin mom looked like she wanted to disappear into her Tupperware. I nodded politely, but something twisted in my gut. It wasn't what she said, it was how she said it. That calculated dismissal. That subtle gatekeeping. In that moment, I knew I'd stepped on her turf. From that point forward, things shifted. Linda's eyes followed me more closely, her smiles became tighter, and her interactions increasingly laced with sugar-coated barbs. At school, I was suddenly volunteered for the least desirable committees: textbook inventory, bathroom hall pass audits, even the gum-on-desk cleanup initiative. At first, I thought it was coincidence. Then I started noticing patterns. Linda always happened to be around when assignments were handed out, and her praise of my peers often came with thinly veiled jabs at me. We should all follow Janet's lead, so organized, so respectful of tradition, she'd say, pointedly ignoring my contributions. Meanwhile, back in the neighborhood, she watched my house like a hawk. I'd catch her outside watering already soaked flower beds while eyeing my recycling bin or inspecting the edge of my lawn for grass that dared to grow too freely. But the real turning point, the one that made me realize I was officially a target, came one quiet Friday night. I had friends visiting from out of town, 2 fellow teachers I'd known since undergrad, and we were sitting on my back patio drinking sangria and laughing about the time I accidentally called a parent dude during a Zoom conference. Around 7 p.m., my doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Linda standing there in a full tennis outfit. I'd never once seen her near the community courts. "Hello, neighbor," she chirped, her smile tighter than ever. "I'm hosting the monthly book club tonight. Several ladies will be parking on the street, and your large vehicle," she gestured vaguely toward my Jeep, "is making things look very cluttered." I blinked. "My Jeep is in my driveway, not the street." "Yes," she agreed, "but it's visible from the street. We try to maintain a certain aesthetic here in Pine Ridge. Perhaps you could park it in your garage." I blinked again. "I'm still unpacking. My garage is full. And again, the Jeep is in my driveway." After the Jeep incident, Linda went from passive-aggressive to actively aggressive in the most maddeningly legalistic ways possible. Not once did she lose that saccharine tone. But beneath it pulsed something harder, colder. I started receiving formal notices nearly every week. First it was my mailbox. Not compliant with the updated Pine Ridge aesthetic guidelines, the letter read, "Recommend replacement with HOA-approved model #C47, available from approved vendor only." I checked the binder. Model #C47 looked exactly like mine. Only difference: mine had a small chip in the paint. Then came the flower pots. I had placed 2 ceramic planters with marigolds beside my front steps. They were cheerful, bright, and, according to Linda, out of harmony with the neighborhood's seasonal color palette. I was cited for decorative inconsistency. I appealed. I got a response with highlighted passages and 3 attached photos from concerned neighbors. One of those neighbors was clearly Linda. She had the same pale pink nail polish and angular wristwatch in the mirror reflection of one photo. Next, she cited my garbage bins for being too visible, despite being behind a small privacy fence. The pettiness was relentless. She weaponized the binder like a bureaucratic whip, each paper cut slowly bleeding away at my patience. The real wound wasn't from the fines, it was from the intent. The message was clear. You don't belong here. You will be made uncomfortable until you leave or fall in line. It was high school clique warfare, HOA edition. And then I did something that finally tipped the balance. I planted a vegetable garden. Just a modest one, 2 raised beds in the backyard, filled with rich compost, a few rows of tomatoes, peppers, basil, and green beans. A project to keep my hands busy and my mind quiet. I needed it. After long days of grading essays and navigating Linda's nonsense, it became my sanctuary. But it didn't stay a secret for long. One afternoon, as I was harvesting the first handful of cherry tomatoes, I heard her heels clicking on the sidewalk behind my fence. "You're planting food?" she asked through the slats, voice tight with disdain. "Isn't that against code?" I stood slowly. "In the backyard. No rule against it." Her eyes narrowed. "It attracts pests. Raccoons. And it lowers property value if it gets out of control. It's in 2 raised beds. And it's feeding me, not pests." She didn't respond. Just stared, cataloging, filing this moment away for strategic retaliation. 2 days later, I got another violation letter. "Unauthorized agricultural installation," it read. "Not in keeping with community standards. Immediate removal recommended to avoid formal sanction." That night, I stared at the letter while sipping wine on the back porch. The plants glowed under the fairy lights strung above. I was tired of trying to play polite. I made a decision. No more backing down. The garden stayed. Then things got ugly. One morning, I stepped out to find my garden beds ripped open. Soil overturned. Plants uprooted. Tomato stakes bent. Basil trampled like someone had taken pleasure in stomping every last leaf. It wasn't an animal. There were boot prints in the dirt. Human. Intentional. I stood there in my pajamas, fists clenched, jaw locked, breathing through my nose. This wasn't just harassment. It was sabotage. I reported it to the HOA. Linda was the one who received complaints, of course. I received a reply within 2 hours. "We have no record of any formal complaint regarding vandalism. Perhaps a stray dog got into the garden? Recommend increased fencing to avoid further disruption." It was gaslighting. Blatant. I called the non-emergency police line and filed a vandalism report. The officer was polite but non-committal. "Without video evidence, not much we can do," he said. "Could have been kids." I bought a camera the same day. But even more than anger, what simmered in me now was resolve. She wasn't going to win. I wasn't entirely alone. Mrs. Eloise Carter, who lived 2 doors down, caught me in the street a week later. She was a retired nurse in her 70s, always in cardigans and clogs, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "I saw what happened to your garden," she said in a low voice. "It wasn't random." I looked at her, uncertain. "You saw something?" She nodded, glancing around like we were in a Cold War spy movie. "Linda's husband, Mark, was out walking their dog late. He took a detour through your yard. Came out 15 minutes later without the dog. And he was wiping mud off his shoes." My chest tightened. "You're sure?" Eloise nodded again. "Linda's been doing this kind of thing for years. She makes life hell for anyone she doesn't like. Got the Ramirez family to move out in 6 months. Harassed a veteran over his flag placement. She thinks she owns this street." I felt something shift in that moment. A tremor of hope. Maybe I wasn't crazy. Maybe I wasn't alone. Eloise stepped closer. "You want help? I'll help. But be careful. Linda fights dirty." That night, I added another camera. And I started documenting everything. It all came to a head at the monthly HOA meeting. Held in the community clubhouse, these meetings were usually stiff affairs. Robert's Rules of Order, typed agendas, residents mostly silent while Linda ran the show. But not this time. I came prepared, with photos of the garden before and after the destruction, the police report, and a printed map of HOA regulations that disproved every citation she'd sent me. I brought Eloise as backup. She brought another neighbor, Craig, who'd been fined $50 for painting his shutters a slightly non-regulation shade of beige. We waited until the open concerns portion of the meeting. I stood up, voice calm but loud enough to carry. "I'd like to file a formal grievance against the HOA president for harassment, property damage cover-up, and rule manipulation." The room went silent. Linda's face didn't move, but her hands gripped the table. I laid out the facts. The garden. The destroyed plants. The baseless citations. The tampered photos. I passed around the binders. I showed the timeline. I played a security clip of Linda's husband walking toward my backyard at midnight. There were murmurs. People whispering. shuffling in seats. Linda tried to respond. I hardly think this is the proper venue. It's exactly the proper venue, I said. You've weaponized this HOA. You've used your position to intimidate and harass residents into submission. But I'm done playing your game. Craig stood up. She fined me for shutters. My wife cried for a week. Someone else spoke. She made us remove our swing set. Said it was too visually disruptive. Linda tried to regain control, but it was slipping. The room had cracked. And I wasn't alone anymore. After the HOA meeting meltdown, Linda didn't back down, she doubled down. The very next morning, I got another citation. Violation of neighborhood noise ordinances, power tools used outside of approved weekday hours. The power tools. My electric toothbrush had buzzed near an open bathroom window. It was laughable. But it was also war. I started building a coalition. Eloise, Craig, and I set up a group chat, then a neighborhood flyer campaign disguised as an informal neighborhood improvement interest group. In less than 2 weeks, we had 15 members. Stories poured in, absurd, petty, sometimes cruel. Linda had punished one resident for putting up holiday lights before Thanksgiving. Another had been fined for letting their dog bark at a squirrel. I created a website, pineridgetruth.com. It housed every complaint, every rule Linda had bent or twisted. Eloise helped write testimonials. Craig worked tech. We linked to HOA laws, embedded camera footage, uploaded PDFs of citations. Anonymous, of course. But Linda knew. The page exploded across the neighborhood. By the end of week 3, we had over 400 unique visitors in a community of 200 homes. We posted a final message, it's time for a vote. According to the HOA bylaws, any member of the community could call a vote of no confidence on the board president if they gathered signatures from at least 30% of residents. We gathered 62 in 4 days. When I handed the petition over during the next HOA meeting, Linda's face was an unreadable mask. But her hands trembled slightly as she took the envelope. I'll review this with the board, she said. You don't have that authority, I replied, standing in front of the residents packed into the clubhouse. According to Article 4, subsection 3b, a vote must be held within 2 weeks. She tried to stall, claimed the signatures weren't verified, that the website was libelous, that she had been the victim of coordinated digital harassment. But it was too late. We were done playing polite. The board, sensing the shift in public wind, scheduled the vote for the following Friday. The day of the vote, the line to the clubhouse stretched around the corner. Residents chatted like it was a block party. Someone even brought cookies. When the final tally was read, it wasn't even close. Linda Harrington, 14 votes to stay, 123 to remove. Her face crumpled, just a little, just enough. She stood, heels clicking one last time, and walked out without a word. You'd think that would be the end of it. But we weren't done. With Linda ousted, a new interim president was appointed, Marvin Liu, a quiet but sharp accountant who lived on Birch Court. He and I got coffee 2 days after the vote. I started looking at the books, he said, sipping slowly. You might want to see this. Turns out, Linda had been using HOA funds to pay for landscaping services on her property, almost triple the frequency of everyone else. There were charges for security consulting, legal correspondence, and neighborhood upgrades that never existed. Over $12,000 in unexplained expenses over 2 years. The board voted unanimously to press charges. Marvin submitted the evidence to the city. Linda was served with a formal inquiry a month later. She retaliated, of course, accused the HOA of discrimination, harassment, conspiracy. But her voice no longer held sway. Her army had evaporated. And just like that, the iron grip she held over Pine Ridge Estates cracked, then collapsed entirely. With Linda gone, things changed quickly. The absurd rules, gone. The binder, replaced with a digital portal focused on community input. People started coming out of their houses more. Yard sales returned. Holiday lights danced across rooftops like we hadn't seen in years. I rebuilt the garden. This time it was bigger. 4 raised beds, trellises for beans, a little stone path winding through rows of sunflowers. Craig helped me install a rain barrel. Eloise donated a vintage bird bath. We named it the Free Plot. Kids came by to pick cherry tomatoes. Someone painted a little sign, "Welcome to the Revolution Garden." One afternoon, I caught a couple pushing a stroller down the sidewalk. They stopped by the garden, chatting quietly. The woman turned to me and smiled. "We heard this neighborhood used to be difficult," she said, almost apologetic. "But it seems lovely now." I smiled back, wiping dirt from my hands. "It had a weed problem," I said. "But we pulled it out." Months passed. Summer melted into fall, and with it came a sense of calm I hadn't known in years. No more letters. No more threats. Just warm days, cool evenings, and the gentle buzz of neighborly life returning. The community was stronger than ever. Marvin stayed on as HOA president with a rotating citizen advisory board. We started a garden club, a fall festival, even a tiny lending library. I found myself smiling more, sleeping better, laughing again. But occasionally, I'd catch a glimpse of a silver Mercedes at the edge of the neighborhood. Parked, watching, then gone. Linda never moved far. Her house didn't sell, not with the scandal. She stayed inside, curtains drawn, a queen in exile. Sometimes I wondered what she thought, watching a neighborhood she once ruled blossom without her. Sometimes I didn't care. This place, Pine Ridge Estates, had tried to become a prison. But we turned it into a garden. And I had earned every bloom.